Everyone, welcome to the Overview of the Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 15th of April 2025. It's so nice to be able to do a meeting with it still being light outside. Feels like summer is finally on its way. Can we start off with any declarations of interest? Oh no, sorry, I won't start off with that. I should advise everyone, of course, that this is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, just in case anybody feared we weren't being. We'll start with our declarations of interest. There being none, we'll move on to apologies for absence and any substitutes.
Paul and Councillor Wymark, and the substitutes are Councillor Berry and Councillor Nurden.
Sorry, thank you, James. Switched off there, forgetting that we're sharing. We'll go to item number 3, minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 11th of March. Is everybody happy with those minutes? I see lots of nodding. Okay, I'm assuming that everyone's accepted them as being correct. We'll move on to Chairman's announcements. I think you did just mention, Sinead, that the report will be ready for the next...
The annual report.
Annual report
Yes.
will be ready for the next meeting. We explained at the last meeting why that has been slightly delayed in the agenda. It may need to do with officers' time being used for other important things like local government review and covering for the fact that Mike and people like that are no longer with us. Not in a bad way. I know he got a job elsewhere. I don't want anyone to think who hadn't tuned in that Mike had died. I'm sure he's very happy in his new job. So we'll move on to item number 5, public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Okay, well, we're straight onto the Cabinet reports. And it's best in class temporary accommodation purchase. And the lead officers are Lindsay and Richard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, this report sets out a full business case for the purchase of additional temporary accommodation properties. The report details there's an expected increase in demand in our temporary accommodation and the plans to help address this. So we've had some recent data analysis done, which has shown that numbers in TA are due to increase significantly within the next few years. And this obviously comes with significant associated costs, and all the details of that are in the report. The paper details how purchasing TA will help alleviate this predicted revenue spend, as owned accommodation does cost the council significantly less than spot purchased accommodation. On average, we're looking at about a difference of £17,000 per year per unit, so the costs, as I say, are significant. Looking at the expected demand, so the numbers, but also the type of customers who are predicted to present to us for temporary accommodation, we are proposing to buy 6 single units, and these will be purchased as 3-bed houses, so that would be 2 houses to cover the 6 single units, and 15 family units to be purchased as 2-bed flats. This was decided that gives us the most flexibility for use and also saleability in the future when hopefully the demand decreases and then we need to release the capital. Just to note as well, so in the last round we recently accepted LAF funding for the funding for 3 of this TA units, which will help towards the purchase of those and help towards the cost. Just to note as well that the purchase of owned accommodation doesn't just allow us to reduce the costs, it also allows us to control the quality of the accommodation that we provide to our temporary accommodation residents to ensure that they continue to have a decent standard of living, and that we ensure that the properties we buy are in a suitable location where they have access to green spaces, facilities, public transport, those kinds of things as well. So although the data in here does predict the demand will increase for the next few years, there is also a fully detailed programme of work that we have going on within the team, which should start to yield results in terms of helping the prevention and getting people out of TA as well. So we're hoping that that is going to hopefully decrease the numbers that we may need to purchase in future years. So this paper only covers purchases for this financial year, and then we plan to review the impact of our overall programme of work and then bring a further report at the end of 25-26 to consider our position going forward. That's everything I have to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Grant, got his hand up first. We'll go to Grant.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your report. You'll have to forgive me if a lot of this that I'm going to be asking is known to the rest of the committee members, but I would like to get a bit of clarification, if I may, on some of the things. In the first paragraph, it says that specifically 2 3-bed houses to be used as houses of multiple occupation. My understanding of a house of multiple occupation is that it is 5 persons that are not related to each other resident in one house. And if these are 3-bed units, how can they be classified as a house of multiple occupation? Right. Yes, certainly.
So I need my friend Kevin here to explain the real definition of a HMO. I think for the purpose of this paper, we've utilised the terminology HMO as more of it's a shared house. So as we are a local authority, we don't necessarily have to get HMO licences ourselves. We monitor our HMOs as our assets. So for this paper, it's more of a case of this is going to be a single household and it's going to be 3 people rather than it being specifically regarding an HMO. My understanding, which again I would have to refer to my good friend Kevin Philcox to actually understand the definition, is a HMO is more about individuals who are not related sharing a property. It doesn't necessarily have to have a limit on the amount of houses. It just might be what needs to be licensed and what doesn't need to be licensed. But again, for this, it's very much a case of, rather than this being a 3-bed that we're buying for a family, this is a 3-bed for 3 single people, which will be assessed and have a rental charge of 3 units.
Thank you, Richard. Going on to the second paragraph. Right. Second paragraph, we're talking about, and the Broadland Growth Reserve is where you're going to take the monies from. Just curious to know, with local government reorganisation and the future of Broadland growth, I mean, might as well take the whole lot. That was just a thought that I had. You talk about external borrowing and interest rates falling below. When interest rates fall to an appropriate level, external borrowing will be undertaken. So just 2 questions there. When the interest rates fall, and of course interest rates go up and down, is there some form of, some sort of guarantee that interest rates won't go up again, after having fallen, and we borrow money? Is there any guarantee that the interest rate that we will be charged will go up? So that's just the first part of that question. And then we are saying that it will be covered by the rental income that is obtained from these properties. Is there, and is it possible that the house or the flat, whatever, becomes unoccupied? And who's going to carry the cost in those instances?
So, Rodney, is it okay if I come to you for the first one, but I'll cover the second one first? So, all the modelling has been... Sorry, you should be covering this as you've done all the work.
I can cover it if you
Go on
like.
then.
Yeah, so this has been thoroughly modelled out, and the amount that we are allowed to charge for formula rents, for example, and cover our costs in terms of the facilities that we're providing and the utilities, is all in the model. But also has been taken into account is the cost of borrowing, but also the expected percentage of occupation of those properties. So it's not expected that those costs are 100% occupied, and also it's not expected as well that we will be able to recover 100% of that from the tenant. We are realistic the fact that these are tenants with vulnerable circumstances, maybe chaotic lives. So we have looked at the level of income that we get from the tenant covered by HB and the amount that they need to pay themselves. And the modelling has been set at a realistic expectation of what we could get back from the tenant, and again a realistic percentage of occupation as well. So we're not basing that on 100% recovery and 100% occupation as well.
Our current performance for voids is 90%, 97% occupancy. So we're very high up there. We also have residents still in bed and breakfast. So if I had these properties tomorrow, we could fill the properties with residents currently homeless. So we have plenty of demand. What we've consistently thought about is there is going to always be a need for bed and breakfast, because what we don't want to do is buy all the properties to reach our peak, and then our peak is over within a few months, and then we've got too many superfluous properties. So it's kind of, imagine the bend is like that. We're kind of hitting in the middle to make sure that the revenue we receive in is still enough to address our B&B costs going out. So it has a balanced impact on our budget. Is there a follow-up for that before we go over to Ron? Yeah?
Just to, because it says here that when the interest rates fall to an appropriate level, external borrowing will then be undertaken. So that what you've just mentioned, has that been taken into account when the decision is being made that the appropriate level of the interest rate has been determined? So we know at this point what it's going to be if it falls below, and has it taken into account those circumstances where you have got those unoccupied and those situations?
I'm going to think of a long way to say yes, because basically yes. We've got a wonderful spreadsheet again that Lindsay and her team have designed. It takes occupancy levels, it takes interest rate levels. You can put a certain amount in one box and it changes the other boxes, etc., etc. So we know, based on the current interest rates, that we need to do what level of borrowing we would be able to, what capital needs to go in, etc., etc., to make sure everything balances up. Okay. The other question was for Rodney regarding the ebbs and flows of interest rates, which are beyond me.
Thank you. Yes, the intention would be that when you take out the borrowing, you would fix the interest rate at that time. So, for instance, if the rates were to fall to 4%, we determined that was the correct time to borrow, we'd fix at 4%. We don't really want to specify exactly what that number is, because if the rates fell to 4%, but the prediction was actually in a month's time they were going to fall to 3.5%, you might then make the decision that time to hold off a bit longer. So actually it's a guideline of where we're going to be deciding to fix the rates, but not a definite, as soon as it drops to 3.97%, we'll take it out, just in case there's some fluctuations we'd like to take account of at that time.
Thanks, Rodney. Next question, if I may. We're now looking at paragraph 5. I will be jumping around in the report. It says here that to confirm previously agreed operating model to recruit 1 times FTE officer for every additional purchase of 10 units of temporary accommodation. And it ends off by saying, and therefore will be a nil cost to the council. So just question with regards to you've already got 44 units. So I assume you've got a 4.4 FTE at the moment, and you're going to recruit an additional 1.7 FTE. So you're going to end up with 6.1 FTEs looking after the housing sector. So if it's going to be a nil cost, who's going to pay for the recruitment costs involved in getting this person? And the second part of my question is, with local government reorganisation, Broadland Living, where's the future for Broadland Living with these staff that are going to be recruited and are currently recruited? What's going to happen with local government? I'm just thinking in terms of the future and these people we're recruiting, but then we may need to, they need to maybe, I don't know, what's going to happen with Broadland Living after local government reorganisation.
So in respect of a nil cost of a council, can I just clarify, when you say cost of recruitment, do you mean the cost of actually paying them, or do you mean the recruitment process?
The recruitment process, because that's, who's going to pay for that part of the the process?
So if I just cover off the wider bit in terms of LGR, the recruitment cost, that kind of thing, those costs are embedded in the service that the HR team provide, regardless of the staff that we go out to recruit. So that's all covered within our existing HR budget. We don't do it down by individual appointment because there's no point doing it down by individual appointment, but there is sufficient recruitment budget in there to pay for that. In terms of LGR, what will happen with, I know you've touched on Broadland Growth, on Broadland Living, what we just don't know at this point in time. There is a lot of water to go under the bridge yet. There's a full business case to be written. Even when the full business case is written and we have a decision from government, then you enter shadow unitary at that point, and it's that shadow unitary that determines what happens with our companies, with our assets, and it's all set down in the structural reform order that will be laid. So with all of that will come later down the line. So we just need to make sure that we feed into that process as it works its way through.
Thanks, Emma. Going down to number 6 in this report. To renegotiate the service level agreement with Broadland Living Limited to make sure all property stock is properly managed and maintained. And you're talking here about significant costs, because I have several of my clients that are involved in property management and maintenance, and it's not cheap. And have you factored in, when you talk about a rent for these properties, that they are going to be sufficiently high to cover the sometimes exorbitant? I mean, when we're talking about maintaining a property, the kitchen needs to be refurbished, or the bathroom needs to be refurbished, or the whole place needs to be recarpeted or needs to be repainted, and those are not cheap. So can I have the satisfaction that you have in your business case worked out that you are going to be able to cover the costs, and they are significant, of maintaining the properties?
Again, I'm going to use Richard's way of talking. Yes, yes, we have. It's all in the details, and it's in the appendices if you want to see the detail of it broken down. But the property management charge is detailed in there as well, so that has been taken into account in the costs. And to reassure you as well, it is a charge which is eligible for housing benefits. So this is an amount that we can put through there as well to ensure that we actually get that income in from the tenant.
And we've seen this year, which is the first year in which Broadland Living started managing the assets side of things rather than tenancy management. They're doing it at an incredibly efficient level. We've seen savings last financial year achieved, and we are now looking at creating a bit of a capital nest egg, which will allow us, so when we do need to do those big investments like kitchens, which do need probably replacing every 5 to 10 years due to the level of use in which they're getting. So we've got that money there, so we're not having to come back here and saying, all of a sudden, I didn't realise I'm going to need 70 odd kitchens, can I have a load of money? We're going to be creating that pot.
Thank you. And then I think I've got a last question for, it's on page 19, 2.3. And it says here that the best-in-class housing temporary accommodation was agreed by the council. This paper proposed purchasing additional council-owned accommodation. And I just need to be satisfied in my head that it is council-owned and not owned by Broadland Living. The properties are actually registered in the name of Broadland Living Limited, which is a private company.
100% we are owning. So any temporary accommodation, we own them. The 10 member of staff for each 10 units, they also work for us as well. So Broadland Living are merely the contractor who then manage the stock. The people are managed by our people, and the stock is held within us.
Sorry, if I could just follow up on that to reassure you, the model only works because of the level of housing benefit you are able to claim, and you can claim that level of housing benefit because the council owned it. Were we to transfer it to a company such as Broadland Living, the numbers simply wouldn't work. So that's a reassurance that they are definitely council owned.
Thank you very much.
Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure you've spent quite a lot of time on your modelling to ensure that these figures add up. There are quite a few variables in there, such as void rates, rate of interest, period of borrowing, and quite a few others. So it's important, or essential in fact, for those assumptions to be as realistic as possible. Can I ask, is there, without wishing to undermine your work in any way, shape or form, is there any third-party sanity check on your modelling carried out by anyone at all or not?
Do you mean third party as in an external organisation? Because our Rodney Finance have been over this with a fine-tooth comb. We've also sat with Councillor Riley on numerous occasions to go through the figures to really make sure they stack up before we got anywhere near doing a paper.
Martin.
Thank you. Really welcome this paper and really pleased to see it come forward. My question wasn't on this as such really, it was more around the LAF funding and I'm really pleased that we managed to get the LAF funding. And in here we're talking about for 25-26 for the purchases and then we'll come back and review it. Have we already done anything regarding LAF 4? Is there going to be a LAF 4? I mean, we've been so successful, and I would just hope that we would be in that same sort of remit.
At this stage, there is no news at all about the possibility of a LAF 4. It's a national problem, this, and the government are well aware that extra money needs to be put into this to help alleviate the problem, but there's no news at the moment, I'm afraid, unless you've heard anything.
No, there's no news, but
lies.
please be assured, if there is any underspend from LAF 3, I think we're on B now,
3B,
aren't we? Yeah. We will be first of all to put our hands up because we are buying the temporary accommodation anyway, so if we can offset some of that cost, we will be straight there saying yes please. We've done that pretty much every time so far. So we're well respected by DLUC, MHCLG, so we're in a good position. They like us and they know we can deliver on time.
Yeah, they're very pleased with our delivery so far, so we have a good relationship with them, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting, and I was sort of like preempting as though, can we put an early bid in? Can we get some more?
Caroline.
Brilliant report. I just wondered what the timeline is going to be like to get these units up and running.
Obviously, that is dependent on a number of factors, availability of the properties, that sort of thing. But we do have an established team who's ready to go and has already set up the project with the expectation that we will be able to move ahead with it. So we're ready to go as soon as the project timeline itself goes until April next year. So we are hoping to have them all done and dusted within the year. Absolutely.
We are. Lindsay's team's getting pretty darn good at this.
They're pretty good at it. Yeah.
Yes.
And every time we do a round of LAF or tier purchases, the process itself gets more and more efficient, and we get better and better at knowing the pitfalls that we may, come across. So no, I'm very confident it will be done within the year. Yeah.
Shane.
Thanks, Joe. Just a point of clarification, really. It says that we've already got an additional 44 units. Is that all the units that we've got, or are there more units that weren't mentioned? I'm just looking at a starting point.
It's always an ever movable feast because we are still purchasing properties because of LAF. At the time of writing, we had 44 available, but there are some others coming online because of LAF that we've already bid for, not this particular land of RAF we're talking about now. So yes, probably slightly more as the months come on, but it was 44 at the time of writing. Yeah.
Mark?
With this, the 15 two-bed flats, so we've voted on 2 rounds of funding so far. Are those 15 from that first round of funding that we went for, or these are a separate one?
So this bid is entirely new, so not counting anything that we've agreed before, we are proposing that we need an additional 15 two-bed flats for family units, yeah.
But the LAF, which we came to last month,
Yes.
that is part
It's
of
going
this.
to help fund this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Jonathan?
Just thinking about, obviously, we're constantly talking about the temporary accommodation. Just as a question, how temporary is this for the residents? So obviously, when we put them in the temporary accommodation, we all understand that the bed and breakfasts were not suitable. This is obviously a lot more suitable and obviously also a lot more cost effective for us as a council. But how easy is it to then move from the temporary accommodation to the permanent accommodation? And as a council, are we thinking about permanent accommodation purchases as well, or is the temporary market where the way forward makes it easier for us to do that? I'm just looking at how temporary is temporary.
So the average stay is depending on the family. So if you're 2-bed need, you're going to move through a lot quicker than if you've got a 4-bed bungalow need. Okay, because that's going to take a lot longer. You're looking at 3 to 6 months at the moment. It used to be 1 to 3 months. We are in the state of 3 to 6 months. The work in which is discussed within the paper about the prevention, the key part is the throughput as well. We need to get people into their accommodation, hopefully before they even touch TA. But if they as soon as they touch TA, we move them through as quickly as possible. And there is a number of interventions we're putting into place. One key of which is at present about 27% of all our social housing goes to people coming out of temporary accommodation. I want to see that increase, and I want people who are assessed as quickly as possible into emergency move very quickly, possibly through a direct let process, so they're moved into somewhere quicker, so we can start seeing that throughput through the system. Because part of the reason we have so many people in there is a little bit of an increase in demand, but it is about getting them out as quickly as possible. To come on to your second point about are we looking to invest, I would argue we don't necessarily have the need to do so. If it would cost a lot of money for a council to go into that market when we've got such successful housing delivery. We have year on year beat our affordable housing delivery, and when I say we, I mean Helen Scoyles and her team. So we are seeing enough affordable housing coming through the system. It's just transferring those people from pre-temporary accommodation into that social housing in the most efficient way possible. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you so much for answering a lot of detailed questions there. I think we're all quite reassured by the level of depth which you've obviously gone into this. And I think also building on the fact that we've now got a successful model, like you say, about purchasing, and we're getting faster through that system, but we know the costs of the accommodation, repairs and the ongoing costs, obviously the staff costs you've highlighted. And just looking through the data, the figures, we've saved £870,000 so far, and the estimated savings by 28-29, £2.7 million. It speaks for itself that this is an incredibly successful policy that the council has of doing it in this way, and the incremental steps you've also highlighted in 3.6 about purchasing so that we don't have a lot of property on our hands that we don't need. We're investing at the right time and planning it in stages. I think speaks volumes about this is something this council should be really proud of, the way that we've got a great team, like you say, about bringing temporary affordable accommodation forward at the right time, at the right level, to get people out of the temporary accommodation, but the work you're doing is saving this council a lot of problems in terms of financing this. You know, look at the council, other problems other councils have across Norfolk, and I know other councils are lauding their basic copying of our model now. I saw North Norfolk very proudly showing off about them doing essentially what we've been doing, but they're just a year behind, or 18 months behind, 3 years behind. Okay. And there's other councils still yet to get on this bandwagon. You know, they're still bandwagon makes it sound like it's something which we shouldn't be doing, but getting on this road to sort of success about saving costs for the council. So thank you so much for all you do. There is a long list of recommendations. I think we can all read them. No one really wants to hear me read out almost equivalent of a whole page 4 of recommendations, but I will vote for them all en bloc. All those in favour of the recommendations as stated.
And that's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you so much, and for the excellent work you do, and I'm sure we'll get further reports back. And I think it's also nice, I should have said, that we know this budget is there, because I think someone asked a couple of times ago, where's this coming from? It was sort of coming, said, oh, the money is there, the money is there. We all can see the money there now and know exactly where it's coming from. So I think that's really useful. Thank you. And Rodney, you didn't get away without saying anything. I thought when I looked at the minutes that are outside the agenda that you were not going to say a thing, but thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the local lettings cascade policy. And Richard is here with a new person, that's Tim Kay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, as said, paper before you is for members to consider proposed revised local lettings policy. As you are all aware, social housing are allocated for our allocations policy. However, around a third are prioritised to local people to the parish. In Broadland, at present, this is first let only. The paper considers 2 main changes: to change to an in perpetuity arrangement, and the second part is to change the cascades, which has these large advantages. It includes former residents, it includes neighbouring parishes to where the development is, and it also provides a more defined timescale to provide more certainty to our residents. At present, BDC currently has around 400 local lettings policy, and they rarely come up to relet because they tend to be in small exception sites. Whereas a comparable LA, who has had it in perpetuity for some time, has around in excess of 2,000 properties that are available through this process. This arrangement will only be for future planning permissions. We're not going to work retrospectively because it would cost an absolute fortune to do so, because we would have to retrospectively go back, and that would also give developers permission to also potentially negotiate other aspects. By taking this approach, we are able to confidently say that local residents who are facing new builds developments in their area will gain access to these homes, and they are being built for local people. Thank you, Chair. I was going to just take questions from that, if that's okay.
Thank you. We'll start with Shane.
Thank you, Chair. On the page 45, I spent a long time sort of looking at 4.1.1 and 4.1.2 and trying to sort of discern the difference between the two. And yeah, I think I sort of got it, but it would help if you could just explain what the difference is between the two.
One's current, one's former residents. 45. Yeah. We've not previously had.
Yeah, so sorry, the first one is for current. So if you're living there right now and you've been there for the last three of the last 10 years, you get priority over people who had lived there previously in the last 3 of the last 10 years. So it's just distinguishing between people currently there and people who were there in the very distant past, very near past.
Thank you. And just a second question on 4.1.4. It's just really to understand why it is that that you've picked at least 10 hours. I mean, DWP normally sort of go for 16 hours. So why 10 hours in terms of employment?
Okay.
Really 10 hours is the generally accepted norm.
not with DWTP, but when we've done the first times, we went for 10 hours employment. And also, previously in Broadland, we didn't have any hours limitation, so it could be people working in the parish. So all they had to have done is worked in the parish for about a week, and they would have been eligible for one of the properties, in effect. So hours and timescales is very good.
I think it's to explain that there is I can't think of the word now, I had it a second ago, a really established role within there, rather than just someone doing a couple of hours. But equally, you don't want to restrict people who, for the 16 hours, it's about having 10, if you're working there 10 hours regularly, then you are part of that community and you have a job and a foothold within that community, and that's why we've gone for the 10 hours.
I was just trying to sort of see whether the 10 hours had come from and whether or not it was something within sort of statute or just something that was arbitrary.
Cascades used by other Norfolk local authorities is the 10 hours. I think I've seen it for other cascades they've used for local lettings and exception sites as well. They often go for 10 hours.
Martin.
Thank you. My question, I think we did discuss it at the communities, in there, but it was really about the timescales and the timings around. You said that you're not going to retrospectively do it, but again, it's the clarity around the positioning of when the point at which it's agreed. So if it's agreed at council, is it any planning application that has not been decided at that point, or is it anything that has not been submitted to the council at that point? Because it is that thing of, yes, anything that is going through at present and has been decided, yes, no, we're not touching that, but just that clear.
I'm going to heroically refer to Kate here.
The easy distinction is if this is approved at Cabinet, we will be looking to include it in any future Section 106s currently being negotiated. So the very early stage, if they're at the draft, we can then include the local lettings policy, the revised one. If not, we will revert back to the Broadland standard Section 106.
Just to clarify, it would be council, not cabinet. It would have to go through to council first. So once it's gone through council and it's become an ironclad policy, after that point, it will be those. So they may be being considered right now. However, it will be once that's signed off at council, we can then move forward on those once the permission's been given.
So if big developments have got outline planning permission, at that point that's not decided because it then has to come through under the individual allocations when it comes through for the actual planning application. So that if someone's got outline planning at the present but not full planning, then that's not included or is included?
If their outline permission is subject to a satisfactory Section 106 agreement, so that would be followed with the drafting, and at that stage we could then include the revised policy if it was agreed.
Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, I'd like to compliment Kay on the work that she's doing. I was at a parish council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and one of the items on the agenda was a letter received from Kay advising of a property that was becoming available, and please, if you knew of anybody who was local, to let them get in touch with you. So I just want to thank you for that.
The local collection property coming up for relet.
And it's a good point. I'm glad you raised it. Just to add, so our housing register, you don't have to have a housing need to go on the housing register. You have to have certain levels of income, etc., to make sure you can't afford within the private rental sector. But if you are adequately housed, but you need to move for some reason, you'll just be on the very lowest banding, and you'll sit there for a while, and then if there is an exception site or if there is a new build site coming up, when that does come up, you may get a priority because you are local to that area. Okay, so it's a general thing to anyone that does sit on parish councils and people are looking at a build. Get them to go on online and get on our housing register, because once they're on there and that property comes up, they're ready to go.
Thank you. Can I just ask, has this been done in relation to all these changes in relation to some concern we've had or some ambiguity around some applications? You know, basically, have we come across something and gone, we're a bit sort of woolly on this, or is it about us just revising it and looking at what other councils have done and sort of aligning ourselves a little bit better? I'm just wondering if it's sort of in response to a concern or in just being proactive in dealing with something that could happen but hasn't happened.
It's more the latter. It's all part, so it links very nicely to the previous paper for the purchase of the temporary accommodation. The wonderful thing about having in perpetuity Section 106 properties is the local housing need tends to then sort itself out in the future. So for places in which we've had quite big delivery of Section 106 properties, our homelessness numbers tends to come down a lot, because if you're in a 2-bed house and you need a 3-bed and there's plenty of Section 106 available, people move around, and then I end up, from a homelessness point of view, with whatever's left, but we end up with a net same the amount of properties, but people are under less strain because they're in a more suitable house then, because things have moved around, so then you end up with a little less homelessness. So I've looked at your neighbours, your South Northing, and looked at the kind of demand we get from there. I'm then looking at the likes of Rackheath delivery, and then thinking, wouldn't it be a shame if in 10 years' time we could look back and go back, housing need is looking after itself, etc. So it's about taking the best to see where we can really lay it down. It wasn't a necessary drive. We've driven it from our point of view because, again, it comes back to that throughput and that prevention part of our temporary accommodation purchase and our homelessness mitigation process.
Anybody else? Eleanor.
Thank you. Just really quickly, does this go to council or is it a key decision by cabinet? Because the paper suggests it goes to council, but in the forward plan it just says cabinet and there's no date for main council for it.
It is on to council, so it just needs to be confirmed on the forward plan.
Okay, no one else wanting to say anything. We will move to the vote. I was just going to say thank you very much for your clarity and of explanation, and yeah, like you say, it fits in nicely with the previous item. It's sort of this whole holistic approach, you know, we do it rather than being piecemeal. I think it's yet another sign of the council being very proactive in dealing with things rather than waiting to be hit by a bus. We step out the way of it. So thank you. We'll go to the recommendation. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Super, thank you so much. And thank you, Richard, for your contribution to both items. And thank you, Kay. We have then item 9, the Broadland Statement of Community Involvement Formal Review. And Adam.
So the Statement of Community Involvement, or the SCI, is another one of those planning policy type documents that you'll be familiar with. It's essentially a code of practice for how we consult on planning matters. We have to periodically review the SCI every 5 years. We last did it in 2022, but as part of a sort of good housekeeping process, we spotted that there were various updates that needed to be done, and as it is a policy document, it does need to come through the cabinet process. So much of the updates are, to clarify, all the updates are factual in nature, so things like referring to the Greater Norwich local plan, referring to the council's strategic plan, although there is a typo that I've spotted it, paragraph 1.12 that I need to correct. Incorporating online consultation into how we engage with communities, various updates to the National Planning Policy Framework, references to the Council's YouTube channel, and so on. Probably the main discussion point you may want to focus on is around the virtual and online consultation processes. Obviously, that's become the norm since the pandemic, and as the process of updating this, we've removed references to the pandemic. We obviously still meet with parish councils and various other resident groups in person, but using Microsoft Teams has become much more part of our day-to-day work. The Cabinet report explains that there were alternative options, so we could go to a full public consultation on how we consult with people through the SCI, but as these updates are factual in nature, we didn't see that was necessary. To reiterate the point, it's probably worth pointing out that the government's own plan-making guidance says there's no requirement for local authorities to consult when reviewing and updating its statement of community involvement, and the government also encourage us to use social media and online consultation platforms. So what we're proposing here follows the general norm of government policy.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they would like to ask? I love the way that basically we don't need to consult with anyone because we're not actually making any changes. So therefore, we don't need to consult about how we consult. It would be a slightly, it would be a weird situation if we felt the need to consult about how we consult when we're not changing how we consult. So let's just, yeah, very Humphrey, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move to the recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you so much. Makes me wonder whether we should have voted or not, you know. We move on to item number 10 on the Cabinet agenda, which is our item number... Oh, no. Our numbers are slightly different from theirs, aren't they? Anyway, the Broadland District Council Risk Management Policy Update, and that is Matt and guest. I wasn't expecting you, Corinne. It was usually your name took me completely by surprise.
Good evening. In your report pack, you have a copy of the proposed risk management policy update and a cover sheet that describes some of the key changes to it. To summarise those a little bit more succinctly, the risk management policy update proposal is largely focused on a review against best practice and implementing that in a way that should make the processes clearer for officers, make the communication of risk clearer, and reduce the burden of time taken to apply the policy as well. It shifts focus onto the risk management system performance beyond a focus on strategic risk registers themselves, and it has an explicit focus on inherent risks as well as residual risks, so that we monitor both and consider the costs of the controls against the changing inherent risk to achieve the residual risk. It shifts focus from mitigating actions to the existing and current controls so that we keep that forward focus that risk management requires. It also attempts to bring a more concrete approach to the risk rating procedures, including a more concrete overall risk rating with associated risk appetite, risk impact, and likelihood word pictures. So overall, it should help to clarify the communication of how risks are being managed and how the policy is being applied to manage those risks itself. You shouldn't expect to see too much changes in the risk registers directly from here, but what it should mean when you're discussing it, that everyone is speaking a common language and that it is easier to tell whether progress is being made and work is being done to identify and control risks over time. Happy to take any questions.
I'll start with Paul and go to Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, I see that there's a review, a major review quarterly. How frequently do you actually do a risk review on individual projects?
So for the strategic risk register, this shifts it to that quarterly review at a minimum to feed through into reporting to Cabinet. The expectation is, and the guidance and the policy is that risks should be identified as a day-to-day activity and documented, communicated, acted on as they're identified as well. We do see far more frequently than the quarterly review changes to new risk items or updates to single risk items as well. So that is happening in practice. The change to the policy should just help to make that a little bit clearer about the steps to take when those are being updated.
Okay, so if you do have an out-of-line situation, is that then escalated, or do you wait until the quarterly review before it's formally taken part of?
So it's entered into the strategic risk register, and that involves a CRT member taking ownership of it. So it becomes a point available for a CRT discussion at that point and a CRT decision about whether to escalate it further.
Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Matt. I heard you use the word strategic risk register, but I'm not going to refer to that. I'm just looking at paragraph 4 of your report, and it's basically the last sentence. Approval of the risk management policy update would be followed with updated guidance and training for officers and members if requested. And I was just wondering whether you thought that particularly Cabinet, those in leadership, possibly the chairs of our committees, whether they should undergo the same sort of training, because they need to be very aware of when papers come before them, like a business case, and there are a lot of risks involved in there, that they are able to sort of spot. So I'm just suggesting that you specify that certain members should have the training rather than just if requested, because I don't think that sort of like puts an obligation, because things could go wrong, and it's those in leadership and the Cabinet, for example, that are accountable when things go wrong.
Thank you. I will take that point for consideration and a discussion with governance. We aren't attempting to define member training requirements in this document, so we will make that training available to members as it's developed, but we'll work on the requirements for training specifically outside of this policy. So it will support consideration of training requirements for members, but we'll keep it outside the document so that it doesn't remain static in the document.
I think Emma would like to comment on this, and just want to also say, somebody who does risk assessments for my school, I take the view that when I do a risk assessment, I've done that risk assessment based on a lot of data, which the person I hand the risk assessment to isn't necessarily privy to, and the fact that they understand how a risk assessment has been done, and one has been done for them to make something safe, doesn't mean that they then need to have the same level of expertise as me when I've done that risk assessment, if that makes sense. Because you have to trust that people whose jobs it is to do it right, because they may have been given 100 documents and have a day or two to actually ascertain a risk personally, and me just knowing how having training for that wouldn't enable me, or I wouldn't want to be in a position where I feel that I'm trying to unpick someone's expert knowledge on the level of risk based on me just seeing papers. which means I would not have seen everything. But I'll hand over to Emma, sorry.
Yeah, it was just on the member training. So Audit Committee do have a rolling training programme. Now, Audit Committee have a specific role in terms of risk and reviewing the risk register, but they do have rolling training, I think, that we do over 2 years. So that Audit Committee will have that, and as Matt said, I'm sure we can look at some Skillgate training, but that will be reliant on members doing the Skillgate training, and I'll leave that comment there, Chair.
And Tony, I think you're chairman of audit, aren't you? So you would probably be undertaking such training, I'm sure.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to ask? Thank you. I'm a Sado because I do this part of my job. I love a grid like that. I don't know why, just because it makes it easy to understand, but I think it also underlines the fact that significant and severe risks can also be a low risk, because people do seem to have a job understanding that sometimes. It's risky walking down the road. There's a high risk. The potential for of a severe injury is incredibly high, but we don't think have to do anything much about it other than understand that it's extremely rare, and if we take certain actions, then these risks are minimal and almost certain to never happen. So again, that chart's there for everyone to see and hopefully make sense of. Tony, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to back up what you were saying, Mr. Chairman. Is that table and the risk rating, the way it's actually done now, has improved a lot. It makes a lot more sense than the system that we were using before.
It seems to have more categories than even the ones we use for school, because there's much more nuance between those levels of risk and 1 to 5, and it's lots of you use a 1 to 4, and this gives more flexibility and more understanding of the problems and the complexity of risk, which across a council like this is going to vary so much depending on what we do. Given that we are where we are, let's move to the recommendation. All those in favour?
And that's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you so much. That concludes our meeting in less than an hour. It's now 7:27. Thank you everybody for your attention. Corinne, sorry for forgetting your name. I prepared who I was going to say hello to, and then you walked up and my brain just failed me. Thank you.